Death and the Dog is the 12th episode of the 4th season of Frasier. This is directed by the wonderful James Burrows, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it's a brilliant episode. It's very depressing at times, and the title doesn't make it sound like the most happy episode, but there are some really brilliant moments in this, and it's really moving and meaningful as well. And it starts off at KCL. And there are no callers, which must be a terrifying situation, but eventually somebody phones in, and because they're not very busy, Frasier decides to tell a story of something that happened a few days ago, and this involves Eddie. But first of all, we're in Cafe Nervosa, and Daphne and Martin and Eddie are there, and so is Roz. Roz actually gets set up by Frasier with a gynecologist who comes into Cafe Nervosa. Roz doesn't know that he's a gynecologist until she agrees to go on the date, and this comes up a few times throughout the episode. We then go back to Frasier's apartment, and Martin is on the floor trying to get Eddie to engage with Mr. Carrot and the hamburger, and honestly, it is heartbreaking to see Eddie. It also really is testament to how well trained Moose is, because here we have a dog lying on the chair and he is not engaging with any dog toys. He's a very, very good performer. And Niles, it's a depressing episode, but it's very funny as well. Niles brings over what Martin refers to as the four-legged Maris. This is, of course, Niles' dog, and we've met the dog before. To be honest, I kind of forgot about the dog. It doesn't really come up that much in conversation, but the dog comes over, and Niles is holding the dog, kind of rocking it back and forth, trying to get Eddie to engage with it, trying to get the four-legged Maris to engage with Eddie, and in the end, the four-legged Maris just runs off out of sight, and then they start arguing, the humans start arguing about what Eddie can understand, and we get the point of view of Eddie, and I thought showing his perspective was really well done, very convincing. And then Martin says he's going to have to call in a dog psychiatrist. And Frasier and Niles think that this is ludicrous, and they start talking about psychiatry, and then we get the point of view of Martin observing Frasier and Niles, and it's very, very well done and really thoroughly enjoyable. We then briefly cut back to KCL. Roz almost starts to tell some more about her story with this gynecologist, but then we quickly cut back to Eddie. They're waiting for the dog psychiatrist, and then he arrives. And it's a character called Dr. Shaw, and he's asking the humans how Eddie would behave if he were a human in different situations. What would he cook for a dinner party? What's his favourite fragrance? And I didn't necessarily know what the point of this was. And needless to say, Frasier and Niles are kind of making fun of it. And once the questions were finished, Dr. Shaw explained that actually the point of the test was to assess everybody else in the household. I guess it's to assess, first of all, their behaviour, but also how they perceive Eddie. And I think that was pretty great and rather telling quite a lot about Frasier and Niles. And then Dr. Shaw goes through to Martin's room with Eddie. And quite a while later, he comes back through and declares that yes, Eddie is depressed. And if there has not been any change in his routine, it must be because he's reacting to somebody else, which I think is really true. If you're a pet owner or if you've ever had a pet, you'll know that your own mood can affect the mood of your animals. They can often perceive when we're unhappy. They're absolutely amazing. And this is what we believe is wrong with Eddie. And Dr. Shaw suggests that they talk in a happy tone around Eddie, which I love. I love that because this is something that I do as a cat owner. And I think it works so well. I'm not that I'm a professional, but just in my experience with my cat, I will never talk to my cat in a negative tone. For example, if I'm pretending to give her into trouble, for example, if she's missed her litter tray and I'm calling her a smelly poo, I'm going to still do it in a happy tone, even though inside I'm really irritated by what she's done. I'm obviously not going to give her into trouble for that, so I will talk to her in a happy tone, while really I'm calling her names and cursing her out. And I think it works really well. If you're portraying this happy tone, the animal is going to pick up on that, even if the words you're saying maybe aren't the happiest. And I think that this is a really great message for the episode to deliver, that animals can pick up on your tone. And Roz comes over at the worst possible time to say that she wants to end herself because of what happened with the gynecologist, and they do talk a little bit in a happy tone while they're talking about quite a depressing situation. I wish they'd extended that a little bit more. I feel like they were just scratching the surface of getting the comedy out of them talking about something unhappy in a happy tone. I think they could have maybe stretched that out just a little bit to get a little bit more from it, but it was a nice idea. It worked well, just not enough. And later on, they're all talking about how happy they all are, or rather, how not happy they all are. And honestly, for about 2 or 3 minutes, it is so depressing. It is the most depressing thing ever. And then the mood lifts again. Eddie comes scampering into the room, and it turns out he was just unhappy because he was missing his favourite doll. He's got a Barbie doll, or a Barbie doll adjacent kind of doll. And then Frasier talks about for whom the bell tolls, and then we hear a ding, and it takes a second for Daphne to realise it's the biscuits. And when she said biscuits, it didn't register that she was saying biscuits until Frasier said, "By biscuits, do you mean cookies?" And then I thought, they really don't lean in to the differences in vocabulary enough. They could get so much comedy out of Daphne's Britishisms and Frasier and the others not understanding them. There are so many things they could do with that. Nothing extensive. I think it would get quite old quite quickly, but I feel like it's something I would have liked to have seen a little bit more. But then I am speaking as a British person, so maybe I'm biased. Maybe if I was American, I might not find that amusing, because it would probably just be confusing more than anything else. But personally, I liked that little nod to the fact that Daphne was using a British word, as I imagine would be a very realistic situation, and I rather liked it. And then we're down at KCL again, and Frasier says, rather eloquently, "Treat yourself to your favourite toy, whatever that might be." And we have this great message here that life is too short. Do the things that you enjoy. Make everything in your life as happy as it can be, because there's no point in being miserable. And he then says, have the cookie or eat the cookie. And he then bites into the cookie and he hurts his tooth. So maybe there's too much of a good thing. It's all about balance. And off he goes to the dentist. And then in the final scene over the end credits, we have the gynecologist coming into Cafe Nervosa. And we see him walking up to a woman, presumably asking if he can join her. And when he goes to get a coffee, Roz swoops in and whispers something to the woman, clearly telling her, by the way, that guy's a gynecologist. And the woman flees the scene. So I think Roz was maybe doing her a favour, but it must be pretty difficult to be a gynecologist if you're not already in a committed relationship. And you're straight, of course. But nevertheless, it was an entertaining way to end the episode. Based on the title, this sounded like it was going to be an absolutely appalling watch, by which I mean heartbreaking, challenging to watch, overly emotional. But actually, I think they got the balance. They got the balance perfectly. We had some gorgeous moments with Eddie, some really thought-provoking moments about happiness and whether we allow ourselves to be happy, or if everything just drags us down, and whether or not something as simple as our favourite toy can cheer us up. Death and the Dog is a beautiful episode, very funny but very moving, and ultimately a real credit to the 4th season of Frasier.